Hi, everybody. Welcome to the bonus content of Workforce, a podcast that blends behavioural science and insights and practical insights to tell you what is going on in the world of work. In this episode, I am talking about Corporate Stockholm Syndrome, and this bonus content is with Christian Hunt. And in particular, he's defining Corporate Stockholm Syndrome and explaining why it is increasing in prevalence around the world. Let's have a listen.
Corporate Stockholm Syndrome is basically this idea that people get trapped within organizations and trapped in jobs that they don't necessarily want to be doing, but feel like where they should be. And they convince themselves that a situation that if they could look at dispassionately would see them leave actually means that they should stay.
So is it more prevalent now as compared to the past?
I think so, because I think people are feeling under a lot more pressure these days. And we know that when we're under pressure, we don't always make the best decisions. Sometimes pressure can bring out really good things, but often it can force us to sort of stick to the things that we know and the comfort blankets that we have. And so I think in a world where careers are becoming more questionable, in the old days, you join one company and you stay there forever. Nowadays, there's a lot more flexibility. We have a lot more options. And so getting it right can put, the sense of how do I get this right can put a lot more people under pressure. And so I think we see people staying there. And we also see organizations are getting smarter at keeping people on board. And we can see that through titles and promotions. And there's lots of lock-ins that mean that if you were if you were wanted to be persuaded to stay, there are all sorts of reasons you can find and be presented to you that make it easier for you to stick around. So yes, I think it's becoming, it's always been there, but I think it's becoming a more prevalent dynamic.
So today you have a pretty impressive job, Christian, but I know you left a traditional corporate type career at one point. Were you a victim of Corporate Stockholm Syndrome?
It's funny, I was looking back and I, with hindsight, and I recognize that hindsight bias is a dangerous thing, but let's create a lovely narrative for ourselves, which is every 3 to 4 years, I would change jobs, either shifting employers or shifting jobs within the organization. And I realized with hindsight that was often driven by me. And so I just felt the need to shift and change. And so stepping outside of the corporate environment, particularly at one stage, I'd worked in a family office. So that was slightly less corporate than some of the other roles that I'd had. It felt like it was about the right time to move. So the challenge wasn't so much, I'm worried about moving on to the next thing. There was a little bit of fear of stepping out into working for myself and finally having to take responsibility for the money that I brought in. The eat what you kill type logic. But I think with hindsight, I'd always been building to this. So when it actually happened, I wasn't as terrified as I perhaps thought I was going to be.
So how do I distinguish between corporate Stockholm Syndrome, someone staying in a job that they don't really want because they're addicted to the status which you have described, and just somebody feeling a bit lackluster about their job? So is there always, because I guess, because given the title, I assume that there's kind of some sort of abuse of the person. Maybe it's abusing their time, maybe they're burning out, maybe they're getting bullied, maybe they're getting isolated. So I assume something like that goes with it.
I think we all intuitively know when something is wrong. We're and when we know this in our personal relationships, we know lots of other situations that we can judge when we're not, something is, our sixth sense tells us something isn't quite right. And then the question is, what do we do about that? Do we choose to ignore that? Do we override it? Do we compensate for it in some way, shape or form? Or do we follow it? And so I think the difference between the two things is if you're sort of feeling slightly lackluster, but generally speaking in an okay relationship, I think we know that. But it's when we start justifying it. And I always think it's a good idea to have a conversation with someone outside and have somebody you can be honest with and say, how are you finding? And that's probably not your peers, even if you trust them, because they're playing the same game. You want to talk to someone, whether it's your parents or a close friend that does something completely differently, where you can start to talk about it and analyze the language that you use and the rationale that you come up with and see what they think. Because I think we're very good at fooling ourselves, but we also know when we're doing it. And so we need somebody to help us to recognize that and be honest about it.